The latest patch for Hearthstone completely changed the meta, so in this video we'll be going over the best decks you can play to climb to a legend. And if you want to play any of these decks, the codes will be in the description. Now let's get started with the best deck, and it seems like it's still a Zee Shaman on top. Despite 2 nerfs to this deck, of course, we got the Goon going to 2 mana, and then Maiev losing a health point. Still seems really good because all the other decks kind of got nerfed much harder than this one. And it's still an amazing climb with just a very strong early game. It actually has a surprising amount of late game. Don't underestimate that. I know I've had games where it felt like, yo, they're almost out of cards, and then it kept drawing. I kept using that double battle cry with the Mugsy Hero Power Disease Might, and you get that even with something like the Holy Ekber, then you get more minions, then you get another double battle cry, you get like Ultraction to generate stuff, then you get Deathwing for 1 mana. And while there is that good late game still, though, I think you prefer to just win in the early game with all the 1-drops, 2-drops here with the buffs. Again, the Maiev, the Goon still help a lot in buffing, and especially great if you can play the security bot on a big board. Like, there's almost no board clears right now in standard, or those decks just don't get played. That can deal with it. So yeah, if you get this early on, you pretty much win the game. So yeah, try and focus on building that board early, and then the win comes naturally. And the second deck we have here is a quest deck. Yay! I'm so excited. So we have the Quest Hunter here. And yeah, it's kind of the same, I think, as was played like before the patch, but it wasn't quite as good as the other Hunter decks, couldn't quite compete. But with the meta slowing down a bit, this deck gets just enough time to do that quest, and it's very, very strong. You get the Food Chain, which then gets you the Shock. I will go to the regular cards, and it gets you an 8, 6, and 4 attack beast. And of course, the 8 attack beast is guaranteed to be a Gamagan, which you also have here in the Contraband stash. So that's pretty much the goal of this deck, right? Just get the quest done by turn 5 or 4 preferably, and then get the Gamagan ahead, and then play it with a Briar Spawn Drake, and you play that. A Briar Spawn Drake, I mean, it's 10 damage for 2 mana, plus whatever this deals damage. I mean, I've died myself on turn 6 from 21 health from an empty board from the Hunter. Like, it's not very fun, but yeah, very good at climbing, just very strong. It's just very consistent at getting that quest done. So I'm also playing kind of weird cards, right? Like Sandmaw. I mean, who wants to play that? A 3 mana 7/2. Well, Quest Hunter is the deck, and it's pretty much, yeah, I'm playing all these beasts, right? Just to do the quest. The rest doesn't matter so much. It's really about doing that quest. Want to get that the Gamagan out, plus the Briar Spawn as soon as possible, and that just wins most games. And the third deck we have here is the Merithra Attack Druid. This deck really benefited from the buffs, because we're playing 2 buffed cards. First of all, we got the Staff of Trickery, now with 4 durability instead of 3, so yeah, just 1 more damage. 1 extra Discover that gets reduced, so that is really nice. But the biggest one, probably the buff, was to Infest the Scullery, although now it only starts at 3, and it costs 1 more mana, but you get 2 minions instead of 1, and yeah, that's a huge difference. Off the back turn 5, you get 2 8-drops if you have a good start, especially Spiderling on 1 is super good. Yeah, you get 2 8-drops on turn 5. Yeah, Jade Guardian's gone, but now we have this one, just get a huge board. But that's not the only thing this deck does, right? It's not really a pure attack route or anything with a ton of attack buffs. It just wants to hit the enemy like once a turn, just to upgrade to Infest the Scullery. That's the main purpose of all the attack buffs, or draw off like the Spider Rider. But also we have the Merithra for that late game stat bomb, as well as the Wicked Fang, which yeah, can come down as early as turn 3. And yeah, generally when this comes down on turn 3, you win the game. This card is crazy good in the early game. And the rest of the deck, it's kind of similar to Merithra Druid before, just a little bit less late game, but yeah, just way stronger early/mid game with those buffs, with those attack buffs. Then as always in these videos, somewhere near the top, there's going to be a Paladin deck, and this time it's the pure Paladin with Aura, so Aura pure Paladin. And we also got the Beatrix, which gets you 10 copies of a card, which is the Scarlet Bruiser here, because that's just really good. The summon with multiple cards we have here with the Reinforcement Aura, with the Scarlet Recruiter. So great way to keep spamming minions aboard, not run out of stuff to recruit with these cards, and also just get a lot of great value with it. And sometimes you get pretty amazing cards of it, although yeah, sometimes you get kind of unplayable. Most of the time it's pretty playable. Also running, of course, Nosdorma, one of the best cards in standard still, the pure Paladin card with Vigilant Sentry. I mean, 3 mana 6/9 was not to like, and just the flight maneuvers to buff any board early and just make it kind of unclearable. And another deck that really benefited from the nerfs was the Herald Warlock, because the game slowed down a bit, right, with all those nerfs hitting the early game. And that's just what this deck needed, just more time in early game, because early on this deck isn't that great, right? It needs like a a couple of turns to get going until you get to like turn 5 with the Spire of Solitude, for example, or just get you get to the overdraw with Godfrey. That's really what you want, right? Get a full hand and overdraw of the Unseen Atlas, and so on. Just get a ton of mana cheat. But yeah, it takes a couple of turns, but yeah, with those nerfs, you got a lot better shot at making to those turns. And yeah, this looks quite good right now. The Herald Warlock list hasn't really changed from before the patch. But yeah, the win rate certainly has. So if you want to be playing some Warlock, now is a great time to play this Herald Warlock. And another deck that benefited from the buffs was the Burn Mage here. We got the Trixie Improviser got buffed. Again, it's like the Scullery card, where yeah, it got nerfed in 2 ways, but also the buff overall is just way better. You get an extra secret now, and that really, really helps. It's just really annoying for the opponent to deal with those secrets. Can help you get burn, or just stop minions from hitting you with the Polymorph secret. And the other buff we have here is Volcanoes to 3 AoE damage. It's quite nice. There's a lot more 3 health minions than 2 health minions that you want to hit with it, so it's way better at clearing the board, and you just get some nice value cards with it, or just damage often, right? Just get a Fireball for 1 mana, get some other burn for 0 mana. It's really helping this deck. But besides that, yeah, not much has changed about the deck, right? You really want to get that Kalak on curve to buff all your damage cards, and then you just do so much damage, especially with the Arcane Flow, kind of double dipping on the spell damage with Kalak, and then with a lack of healing and armor in most decks in the meta, you really easily burn down most opponents. Then here we have the first Death Knight deck. Now I will mention though that this deck didn't have the highest sample size. Usually I try to avoid those decks with low sample size, but the win rate was quite good on it. Just I think most people aren't really that interested in playing out, so they'd rather just play other decks, right? But yeah, it had a pretty good win rate, so I don't want to omit this deck from this list. The Unholy Death Knight, just yeah, really good at getting the board and then making sure you win with that board through the Grave Strength. Definitely the most important card in this deck. Just let you win. Otherwise, yeah, all those small minions, you know, they can be nice, they can be buffed and so on. But yeah, the main way to win is really through that Grave Strength. So always try and look out for that. You just try and get a sticky board to make that work. So yeah, I think it's a solid deck to climb, just not very popular. But I think it had a good enough win rate that it was worth mentioning here. Next up, we have the Logos Warrior. Now, the last patch wasn't very kind to Warrior, of course, when they nerfed Warp Tooth from 3 to 4 friendly characters, which really made it a lot harder for cards like Mother Duck to proc hit, but it's still good. You still want to play it because potentially getting 6/6 charge for free is just way too good. Now what we have here with Logos though is, of course, well, we got Logos, Brawl, and Valera, and then with the Hogger you get the 2 of each. So you have 6 of these Blood Fighters. So in the early game, the goal, right, is just try and survive, try not fall too far behind on board, and try and get those Warp Tooths out. And then by turn 7, you get one of these Blood Fighters on board. And because you have 6 of them, you probably have like 3-4 of them in hand by this point with all the draw you got. And you just keep chaining those Blood Fighters. And yeah, that's just really difficult to deal with. You push damage with those. And you got a bunch of other damage in the deck as well with the fire spells here, with the Volcano and the Warp Tooth. So that could have pushed a lot of damage already. And yeah, you just keep hitting with those Blood Fighters, right? Even with the Logos Death Rattle, you could just hit the enemy in the face for a 12/12. And that wins pretty fast, so this looks to be the best warrior deck right now if you want to be climbing to a legend. And here we have the Herald Rogue, and as always, yeah, Rogue might get nerfed, but it just never ever dies. So Herald Rogue, still a solid deck to climb to a legend with. It pretty much looks like I think it was before the expansion. Not much has changed. I think we just added the Lotus Bookie, because coins are pretty good, because you can cheat out earlier the Twilight Misters, for example, or any of the other cards. So just have more mana in general. That's always nice. Also running the Viper, which you've seen in probably a few more decks earlier. That's there just because, yeah, there's a bunch of Quest Mage, there's a bunch of that Druid. Running that 4 mana weapon that cheats a lot of mana, so that's what it's for. I'm still not entirely convinced by it, but doesn't seem to be the absolute worst to run right now. Though I'm still not really a fan of tech cards. I rather wish that we didn't have to run them. But yeah, it is here right now. That can easily be changed, of course. But yeah, the Rogue, yeah, just kind of the same as before. I'm sure if you played last expansion, you've seen plenty of this. And it's yeah, still pretty much the exact same as it was back then. And here we have the Quest Mage. Now you think the nerfs to early game decks from this patch would have benefited this deck a lot. But turns out, yeah, the weak matchups into the Druid and Hunter, which is like the 2 most played decks at the moment, yeah, just didn't really quite help the Quest Mage though. So maybe if the meta changes, this deck becomes a lot better. For now, it's just a solid deck to climb, just not maybe as good as people thought it was going to be after the patch, when it nerfed a lot of the decks that this deck struggled against. But yeah, it's still, as before, just still functions the same, right? We got Watfin recently. but that's like the only change. You still just want to rush the quest, play the quest, and play your Raptor Herald, Tonal Defender, and just overwhelm the opponent with those stats on the board like turn 5 or turn 6. And yep, that's it. Still, I think it's just going to be the exact same deck for the rest of the year unless some really crazy Discover card comes along. The second Death Knight deck here we have is the Egg Death Knight. And also this deck didn't quite actually benefit from the patch, because I think the patch made there be more Warlocks on ladder, and this deck is absolutely awful against Warlock because of the curse change, of course, that just steals the egg, or against Rafaam, we got the whole polymorph card that polymorphs the whole board. So just like Questmates, even though it was kind of playable for the patch, it didn't actually get an increase, even though the other decks above it got nerfed, but it's still a solid deck. And just like every other egg deck, it kind of functions the same, right? You want to play the egg on 3, then kill it by turn 6, and then on turn 7 you play the Umbra, get a full board of eggs and a 20/20, and just overwhelm the opponent, because a 20/20 is turns out pretty difficult to clear. Now, one different thing here is though is that you do have a lot of mana cheat potentially going on in this deck with that soul boats. That's really super important in this deck, because I feel like whenever my opponent doesn't draw soul boats with this deck, they just don't really win. You really need this card draw, the mana cheat that goes with it. It's really built around soul boats, so yeah, make sure you get that soul boats early on and prepare it, because this allows you to just draw so much, cheat so much mana. And yeah, it really makes the whole deck function. So yeah, this buff from like 2 patches ago really benefited the deck. But in the end, it's still an egg deck. I'm not a very big fan of egg decks. Don't really like playing these. But if you are a fan of it, then this is the best egg deck right now. Okay, now we're getting into the last few decks. And all these decks, I think they're not too amazing to climb with. But I know these are popular decks, and I just want to give you these decks as options to play. Like, they're not terrible or anything. They're not just 40% win rate decks, unplayable, unable to climb with it. But yeah, you do need a little bit more effort to actually climb with these compared to some of the other top tier decks. And yeah, we're starting here with the Rafaam Warlock. Of course, kind of a fan favorite always. It always has a high play rate, especially compared to its win rate. And I have no doubt it's going to be any different this patch. And yeah, it's of course all about that Rafaam. Get those Rafaams played. But usually though, I think a funny thing with Rafaam is I played like 13 games. I didn't win a single time just because I actually completed the Time Thief Rafaam. So don't try and focus on that card to always have to make it work. It only is really neat against like the slowest decks, like another Priest, maybe another Warlock. Those kind of matchups where you really need this card to win. You might otherwise just get outvalued or out-tempoed eventually. And the reason you don't need it is because you have a lot of other threats in this deck. Of course, we have the Rafaams by themselves. I mean, sometimes this is 2 9/9s on turn 7. That is quite strong. We also got the Spire of Solitude, just get potentially a 10/10 twice on turn 5, turn 7. And then you have the Possessed Elements, which summons the Ultra Gigasaur, and most decks don't deal with that, and you just win on the spot once you get that down. Just make sure, don't be bad, don't draw the Ultra Gigasaur. That is my advice for this deck. Make sure to not get it, because it's a little bit unplayable. Now, there is a Sheltered Survivor though, so you can shuffle it back into your deck in case you draw it. But ideally, yeah, just don't draw it, just get these. Win the game with that, and yeah, just have the Rafaam as like a backup win con. Even though the deck is named Rafaam, don't try and focus too much on that. And the third mage deck we have here is the Leyline Mage. Now, always people try and make this work, and it seems like this might be the patch where it's the most viable, though again, like I said, with the last deck, it's still not a great deck. You still have to put way more effort than compared to the other decks on this list earlier. But still, it isn't too easy to climb with, and this deck is still very reliant on the draw order, because you really got to draw those Leyline buffs early, right? The Ley Walker, the Mystic Runesaber, and especially the Search Needle. Without those cards, yeah, the Leyline cards are not really worth playing, and the deck just kind of falls apart. So very important to focus on getting those early. And besides the Leyline card, the rest is just kind of filler to try and stay alive. It's got a bit of a burn approach as well, right? We got like the Time Twisted Seer to go with like Arcane Flow, so you have a nice board clear, especially if they're combined, if you manage to do that. That's really insane with the Time Twisted Seer, huge board clear and burst as well. And this deck is a lot about bursting. Sometimes you can win with building a nice board with the Crystallized Leyline, but often it comes down to just that bursting Leyline just, well, bursting the opponent and then winning that way, plus all the other bursts you have in this deck. And we also have the newly buffed Trixie Improviser here, just like with Burn Mage. Now I don't think we're playing Volcanoes in this deck because it often have too many cards in hand, right? We got the Leyline Nexus trying to often get a lot of cards in hand, so I think that's why we're not playing it. You could probably play it, it's not the worst card, but I think that's why right now some lists like this one are not playing it. Then we have arrived at my favorite deck, of course, of this expansion is the Azalina Priest, the Thief Priest. And yeah, between patches, not much has changed with this deck. Just, yeah, the opponent's decks have changed, and that I think kind of has helped the Priest. The Hunter matchup could be tough, the Shaman matchups were tough, so the balance patch really helped out this deck a bunch. So it got a bit better. Still, no, not the best deck to climb with. It's pretty difficult to play with as well because you really need to have some meta knowledge. This deck's win rate goes up a lot when you go to the higher ranks because you really need to know what is your opponent playing, how can you combine those cards, like how do you mulligan like 2 decks at once, right? Having like a Control Priest deck and whatever the opponent is playing. So it's pretty difficult, but it's also really fun to play, and every game is very different. So definitely, I would recommend this deck if you want to have fun, though maybe not necessarily for a win rate, especially because it's also very slow, so you would be climbing fast with not the highest win rate, but tons of fun if you do play with it. And the final deck we have here is a Herald Death Knight, kind of a last-minute addition, because yeah, I saw a list and yeah, the list actually didn't have too bad of a win rate. Again, just like with the Unholy Death Knight we had earlier, a pretty low sampled list, but it showed some promise. And I know, again, another deck that a lot of people would like to try and play. So it might have gotten a lot better with the latest patch, but again, the sample size isn't too big for this, so I don't want to put it early on and pretend like it's a super good deck, so that's why I put it here at the end. So those are all the decks I've got for you today, all 15 of them as always. The code will be in the description for you to play all of these. Let me know what you thought of these decks. Are you going to be playing any of these? Let me know. If you enjoyed the video, if it was helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next time.